and I am the director of public outreach here at the Leo Beck Institute, as well as the head of the reference division here at the Leo Beck Institute. We have a monthly book club, or almost monthly, and many of you have been with us for years at this point. So thank you for your continued interest. Today we're going to discuss a book. It's called Käsebier Takes Berlin, which literally translated means cheese beer takes Berlin. For our guest today, we are going to have for a fourth time Peter Jelavich. So thank you, Peter, for being with us. He was with us when we discussed Berlin Alexanderplatz, Nathan the Wise, and the Obermans. And Peter Jelavich specializes in the cultural and intellectual history of Europe since the Enlightenment, with emphasis on Germany. His areas of interest include the interaction of elite and popular culture, the history of mass culture and the media, which obviously these are big points in this book, which is one reason I reached out to him, and the application of cultural and social theories to historical study. He is the author of Munich and Theatrical Modernism, Politics, Playwriting, and Performance, 1890 to 1914, Berlin Cabaret, 1993, and Berlin Alexanderplatz, Radio, Film, and the Death of Weimar Culture. That's from 2006. He's currently writing a book on censorship of the arts in Germany from 1890 to the present. And Peter, I will have you begin your presentation, opening presentation, and then we'll open it up as we always do for the general discussion. So you can go ahead and begin. Thank you. You're still on mute.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, now let me get back to the PowerPoint.
Right.
Now, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay, so we all see the PowerPoint. Okay, yes, welcome everyone. Um, uh, as you heard, today we're discussing Gabrielle Tergit's Käsebier Takes Berlin. Now, actually, the German title is more specific. It's Käsebier erobert den Kurfürstendamm. In other words, Käsebier conquers the Kurfürstendamm. And just to give you a sense of the geography that we'll be talking about, up here at the top of the map, you see the center of Berlin. I mean, the traditional historic center. Here's the Brandenburg Gate. Here's Unter den Linden. Here is the Royal Palace. This whole area was up through World War I, not only the political, but also the cultural, commercial, and entertainment center of Berlin. Now, what happened in the 1920s, after World War I, in the Weimar period, is the commercial and entertainment center moved from here to the Kurfürstendamm, which is in the west. So, let me get back to the west. So, in terms of the geography, Käsebier has a theater here in the south in an area called the Hasenheide. And it's a lower middle class, working class area of Berlin. Over the course of the novel, he becomes famous. That is, he becomes, let's put it this way, a fad in Western Berlin. And there's, of course, the plan to move his theater from the Hasenheide down here to the Kurfürstendamm. Now, the title, of course, is ironic because Käsebier does not conquer the Kurfürstendamm. By the time his theater is actually opened, he is passé, and the theater is a flop. In fact, the novel as a whole is ironic because the novel appeared at the end of 1931, but it begins in 1929. And of course, anybody reading the novel at the end of 1931 knows what intervenes, namely the Great Depression. So every reader of the novel knows that all of the plans made in 1929 are coming to naught. And therefore, the irony of the book consists in the fact that we, the readers, know things that the people in the novel do not. Now, the novel deals with many topics: the role of newspapers in the media, commercialism, building speculators, women, and Jews in Weimar Berlin, all of which we can talk about in discussion. In these introductory remarks, I want to provide a bit of historical context around three topics. First of all, the life of the author. Secondly, possible models for the character Käsebier. And third, a commercial building project on the Kurfürstendamm similar to the one in the novel. So let's start out with Gabrielle Tergit. Gabrielle Tergit was the pen name of Elise Hirschmann, who had a long life from 1894 to 1982. Her father was Siegfried Hirschmann, who was one of the founders of the Deutsche Kabelwerke. The Deutsche Kabelwerke was the leading producer of cables in the German mining industry. So Elise Hirschmann was born into a very wealthy family. However, she wanted to be independent. After World War I, she studied history at the University of Berlin, and she wrote a dissertation under Friedrich Meinecke, who was arguably the most important German historian of the time. But she did not follow an academic career. Before 1918, it would have been impossible for a woman and a Jew to become a professor in Germany. And it was difficult enough for women and Jews to become professors during the Weimar Republic. So instead, she turned to journalism, where she took on the pen name Gabrielle Tergit. As Gabrielle Tergit, she wrote for the major liberal newspapers of the time, which disproportionately had Jewish owners, editors, and writers. She wrote primarily for the dailies Berliner Tageblatt and the Vossische Zeitung, as well as for the weekly Die Weltbühne. Her main beat was the courtroom. She became known for her reports on criminal cases, which she wrote in a new style. Previously, courtroom reports had been rather dry and had focused on the legal issues involved. By contrast, Tergit had little to say about the law. Instead, she characterized the accused or the litigants as people caught up in the social, economic, and political challenges of the day. Two topics stood out. She frequently wrote about women on trial, often for having undergone abortions. Tergit laid out the economic and personal difficulties faced by women that led them to take that illegal step. Their judges were sometimes more, sometimes less sympathetic to their plight. Her other main topic concerned political crimes, violent acts committed by leftists and rightists. In these cases, the prejudices of the judges were clear. They were much more likely to convict communists and to exonerate right-wingers and Nazis. In addition to trial reports, Tergit also had a series of articles entitled Berliner Existenzen, Berlin Characters. These articles often took the form of overheard dialogues, and a number of these dialogues were transferred verbatim to Käsebier. One further personal fact about Tergit should be mentioned. In 1928, she married the architect Heinz Reifenberg, and they had a son. Reifenberg was moderately successful, and his style was what one would call contemporary. It was neither modern nor old-fashioned. What do I mean by that? Well, here are two of Reifenberg's houses which still stand in Berlin. It's not modern because, as you can see, it has pitched roof, not flat roof. But it's also not traditional because, if you look, for example, at the window frames are geometric and unornamented. So that's what makes it neither traditional nor modern. That's what makes it contemporary. So through her husband, Tergit gained insights into architecture, design, investors, and developers, which of course are all themes in the novel. Tergit was able to draw upon her observations and personal experiences for Käsebier, which she began writing at the outset of 1931 and which appeared in print at the end of that year. I will not say too much about the novel so that we have much to talk about during discussion, But one obvious question is, was there a Käsebier? The answer is yes and no. The novel is definitely not a roman à clef. No characters fit one-to-one with anyone who lived at that time. But all characters are inspired in part by people whom Tergit personally knew or had read about, and that applies to Käsebier as well. The closest model to Käsebier was a popular performer named Erich Caro. Oh, by the way, this was just going back to Reifenberg. As I said, the outside is contemporary. If anything was modern about him, it was his interior design. This is like an enclosed veranda in one of his houses. So now we move on to Erich Caro. Like Käsebier, Caro had his own theater. But whereas Käsebier's fictional theater was located in the Hasenheide to the south of Berlin, Caro's actual Lachbühne was located to the north on the Weinberg. Now, both Käsebier's fictional theater in the Hasenheide and Caro's Lachbühne created catered to a working class and lower middle class public. Both were introduced to the upscale clientele of Western Berlin through a newspaper article. In the case of Caro, it was written by Heinrich Mann, brother of Thomas Mann and a famous writer in his own right. Mann's article, entitled Varieté im Norden, Variety Show in the North, appeared in the Vossische Zeitung in March 1929. In that article, Mann described the variety acts at the Lachbühne that were presented on stage from 7:30 in the evening until 1 in the morning, all for a cost of only 60 pfennigs. And it was a true variety show. It had singers, dancers, trained animals, things like that. But according to Mann, the high point came after the second intermission. It was a comic one-act play that lasted an hour and that starred the theater's owner, Erich Caro. Caro played a downtrodden figure, constantly humiliated, who eventually cannot take it any longer and who gets into a boxing fight that he wins. If you want to imagine what sort of characters Caro played, think of Charlie Chaplin in the 1920s in Chaplin's silent films. Heinrich Mann said that the public could not stop laughing, and he claimed, quote, "Honestly, there has never been a better skit," end of quote. So based on that article, an upscale clientele started to attend the Lachbühne, just as they streamed to Käsebier's theater in the Hasenheide in the novel. And as in the novel, a book was published about the entertainer, with articles by well-known performers and authors, including Heinrich Mann. Here we see the cover of the book, and here you can see all of the authors starting out with Heinrich Mann. Caro's newfound fame led to an engagement in one of Berlin's two most extravagant variety shows, not the Wintergarten, as was the case with Käsebier, but rather the Scala. So Caro had an engagement for a while at the Scala. As you can see, it's a very fancy upscale variety stage. And it was reviewed in the Vossische Zeitung. This article about Erich Caro in the West starts out with a sentence which basically says that Caro became famous throughout Berlin after the Vossische Zeitung published the article by Heinrich Mann about him. Now, at the Scala, Caro put on a different show, had a different one-act skit, and in that skit, he played a downtrodden husband who flips out and smashes all of the porcelain. There you can see him flipping out and smashing all of the porcelain. There was a lot of slapstick to Caro's performance. I mean, back in his own theater, the Lachbühne, he got into this boxing fight at the end of the skit. Here he starts smashing everything that he can smash in his apartment in his performance at the Scala. So it sounds like Käsebier was Erich Caro, but there's one problem. Caro rarely sang. He was a comedian and a clown. So to find a popular singer who echoes Käsebier, we have to turn to Otto Reuter. Reuter was the son of a traveling salesman, and he became known as a performer of his own songs. During World War I, he even had his own theater. After that, he frequently toured throughout Germany, and in Berlin, he regularly performed in the Wintergarten, Berlin's premier variety stage, along with the Scala. And of course, it was the Wintergarten where Käsebier had a limited engagement in the novel. Like Käsebier, Reuter sang about everyday concerns in a style that was sometimes humorous, sometimes melancholy. Remember, Käsebier's hits had titles like Boy, Isn't Love Swell? How Can He Sleep With That Thin Wall? Or If You Want to Come With Me, Come With, If You Don't Go Your Way Alone. And Reuter's songs had similarly banal titles. Just to give you, we know of about 400 songs that he wrote and performed. Here are just three. On the left, Das macht uns Freude, that makes us happy. Or in the middle, Lass sie sausen, let her go. And on the right, probably his most famous song, In 50 Jahren ist alles vorbei. In 50 years, everything will be gone. So banal titles in both the novel and in real life. Now, like Käsebier, many of Reuter's songs were recorded. Here's one of dozens of records on the left. This song is called Wir lieben uns zu sehr, We Love Each Other Too Much. And as was the case with Käsebier and Caro, a book about Reuter was published, which you see on the right. Thus, the character Käsebier blends elements of Reuter and Caro. But what distinguishes Käsebier from both of them is the fact that both were successful over many decades, while Käsebier's fame lasted only one season. Now, the fad that succeeds Käsebier in the novel is Mickey Mouse. You'll recall the woman who made Käsebier dolls in 1929 switched to Mickey Mouse dolls the following year, and after Reinhold Kaliski is divorced by Waldschmidt's daughter, he is reduced to selling rubber Mickey Mouses. Of course, Mickey Mouse was not a one-season fad. He's popular to this day. He was popular even in Nazi Germany. So popular, in fact, that on December 22nd, 1937, Joseph Goebbels wrote in his diary, quote, I give the Führer 12 Mickey Mouse films for Christmas. That makes him very happy. He is most delighted with this treasure, which hopefully will give him much joy and recreation. Okay, so much for the upcoming holiday season. Moving back to the novel. Even though Käsebier is the title character of Tergit's novel, in many ways he is only a secondary figure. What the novel is really about is how Käsebier is promoted, commercialized, and abandoned. In short, it is a novel about media, consumerism, and entertainment more generally at the end of the Weimar Republic. It starts out in a newspaper office where the editors and authors are trying to decide what will and will not fit in the newspaper every day. When I read these descriptions, I always have to think about the old joke about the New York Times. All the news that fits, we print. Now, the newspaper in the novel, the fictitious Berliner Rundschau, is in many ways like the Berliner Tageblatt, where most of Tergit's articles appeared. The Tageblatt was founded and owned by the Jewish Mosse family, and in fact, the Leo Baeck Institute owns many of the family papers of the Mosse family. As in the novel, the Tageblatt started out as a traditional highbrow daily, but by the end of the 1920s, it was adopting more popular features. Now, in the novel, the banker Muschler is persuaded by Kaliski to develop his vacant plot of land on the Kurfürstendamm and to build a theater for Käsebier as well as apartments. In reality, the Mosse publishing family invested considerable funds in the commercial development on the western end of the Kurfürstendamm on a plot of land that they had inherited. It was called the Woga-Komplex, Wohnhaus-Grundstücks-Aktiengesellschaft, and it was designed by the famous modern architect Erich Mendelssohn. It included a movie theater, a cabaret, a hotel, stores, and an apartment block. Here you see the design. Here is the Kurfürstendamm is here. Here's the movie theater. Here is a building with stores on the ground level and the cabaret on the upper floor. And here are all of the apartment buildings. The movie theater This is what it looked like when it opened, the Universum Filmtheater, which is now the Schaubühne, one of Berlin's premier theaters. Right next to it, here you see it on the side, is where the stores and the cabaret were. Here you see this from the outside. Stores are on the ground floor. Cabaret der Komiker is upstairs. Here on the right, you see what it looked like on the inside. It's very much an Art Deco building on the outside and on the inside as well. What is different, however, so you've got this development on the Kurfürstendamm in the novel, you've got the development in real life, but the difference was that unlike the project in the novel, the Vogel complex was not a financial disaster. Here, by the way, too, these are the apartment buildings from the Vogel complex, the way they look today. So before we finally turn to the discussion, I want to briefly relate what happened to Gabrielle Tergit after 1931. Her novel was a great success, but she could not enjoy it for long. Hitler came to power at the end of January 1933. In March, Nazi stormtroopers tried to burst into her apartment because of the article she had written critical of Hitler and his movement. Her husband was able to keep them at bay, and the next day she fled with her son to Czechoslovakia. Later that year, the whole family moved to Palestine, where her architect husband received some commissions. He designed a house for a friend in Jerusalem, and he also designed a building for the Hebrew University. They lived in Jerusalem from 1933 to 1935, then in Tel Aviv for 3 years. But they moved permanently to the United Kingdom in 1938. The immediate reason was a serious illness that Heinz Reifenberg had developed. But Gabrielle Tergit also felt alienated. She believed that the Zionists were hostile to assimilated Germans like herself, who came to Palestine not out of Zionist beliefs, but because they were escaping persecution. Indeed, a joke of the day said that newcomers to Palestine were asked, "Did you come from conviction or did you come from Germany? Sind Sie hier aus Überzeugung oder sind Sie aus Deutschland?" But in Germany, and occasional post-war trips to Germany, Gabrielle Tergit could not regain her earlier fame. Only toward the end of her long life was her work rediscovered in Berlin. I will leave off there, and I look forward to a nice and interesting and thorough discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks. So we'll begin our discussion